it doesn't make for a great headline like, hey, rubber company is now making more rubber parts than they used to.
Right.
It doesn't, that doesn't sound as cool as like tech startup,
Yeah.
whatever, develop this new technology that is super exciting, but maybe won't get used for anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they had an individual that was tasked with finding a supplier to replace the seals on the vacuum system, on their particle accelerator, their
Right.
giant underground particle accelerator.
Okay.
And they found us.
Yeah.
And so, it's like that person's going to have a different search term than someone
In the aerospace sector, that's an
exactly.
engineer. John Meighan, welcome to Manufacturing Insiders. I'm so proud of what you've been able to do with your business in the last 7 years, and just some really big growth in the past 4 or 5. And to come from where you did, working as an engineer for GE, to be able to take on this huge new responsibility of owning a manufacturing facility and just being able to generate the success that you have is very impressive. I mean, it's huge. Not to mention the fact that, I talked to a lot of manufacturers around town, and everyone has good things to say about you. Everyone thinks that you're an impressive, nice guy. And so I guess what prompted you to kind of make that jump from GE to, to purchasing Lake Erie Rubber?
I mean, at its core, the biggest thing to me was I wanted to do something where we could have a significant positive impact on the Erie community.
Yep.
And I felt like I could have a more direct impact in, creating new jobs and good jobs that people wanted in the community if I was running my own company. So I kind of thought, I had all this great training and experience from working at GE, and I thought, okay, let's combine that training and experience, take it into a small company where, I think a lot of people are aware in Erie, there's a lot of older manufacturing companies that maybe don't have a succession plan. So I thought if I could jump into one of those businesses and maybe breathe some new life into it with some different perspective based on my experience, then we've got a chance that we could really do something that would make an impact for families in Erie and the community in general.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, that's something I want to talk more about in a minute, because you and I have had some conversations about that broader impact, the economic impact, the employment impact, which I think are, they're widely talked about topics in the political circles. And there's a lot of money being thrown around in different places. And I think you and I both share an opinion on what would be the most effective high ROI way to spend that money if we're going to spend it. But what do you think, and this actually kind of leads into that. So if you had decided, hey, I want to start a manufacturing company, and you just went out, you kind of purchased a domain name, you picked a business name, built a new logo, bought a facility, bought new machinery, and then tried to get customers, where do you think you would be now if you had done that as opposed to doing what you did, was purchasing an existing manufacturing company?
I would be out of business.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so difficult to start a company from scratch with no customers.
Right.
And, no existing experience, relationships, all that stuff. I mean, it is infinitely harder than taking over a business in my scenario that had, we were keeping all the existing employees on board, taking all their experience. They had a good customer list. So, I think the odds of succeeding starting something from scratch versus the odds of succeeding when you're trying to just propel a company that's already been around. Our company had been around since the 1960s.
Yep.
So it was well established. It's much easier to do that. There's certainly plenty of challenges associated, but I'd say you've got a lot better chance of succeeding in a scenario with an existing business, for sure.
Yep. So where I was going with that is, if we have, I don't know, the GCAD money, I can't tell you exactly what the figure is, but let's say we have $50 million of money that's allocated towards creating economic growth in the state. Does it make more sense to invest in businesses that are established and somewhat successful but could become much more successful? Or does it make sense to invest all of that money or the majority of that money into the hopes and dreams of a new, a startup?
Yeah, I think, obviously you have to find the right businesses that are really looking to grow.
Right.
But you can definitely create more success by working with companies that have already proven that they can succeed without that money and that are hungry to develop and grow more.
Right.
So, as an example, our company, we're generating about 4 times the revenue that we did 7.5 years ago.
Yep.
And we started from a pretty decent base. I think you would be hard pressed to start a business from scratch and grow it by nearly the amount of dollars, the amount of additional employees that we've hired, or even the amount of investment that we've made. We invest in a lot of different things in Erie, and we use a lot of different services in Erie, and our growth, is just adding more to that. And we haven't had any funding of that type to help us do that. So if we did, I think that there would be even more growth that we could achieve.
Sure. Yeah. I'm curious what your take is on why it is set up that way. I'm trying to remember the line items in the PA state budget, but there is a significant amount of money that's dedicated to, startups and, extremely small businesses. In the obvious stated goal of, Department of Economic Development is economic development, which means creating GDP for a state, right?
Right.
So I wonder what they're missing. Like, why are they spending it in these ways?
I think startups are exciting.
Yeah.
I think people imagine Amazon, right? And
Yeah.
they think, oh man, that's a startup that has grown into this huge thing. It's like more of a headline kind of thing.
Right.
Whereas if you follow different investment thought leaders, most of them will tell you that the best place to invest is in boring manufacturing companies.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the actual ability to grow exists.
Right.
And the likelihood of continued success exists, because boring manufacturing, it's not a flash in the pan. Like boring manufacturing, there's a reason that we exist. We make things that are necessary for life in general.
Right.
And so the likelihood of us going away is pretty small, because we make products that are needed. And so it doesn't make for a great headline like, hey, rubber company is now making more rubber parts than they used to.
Right.
That doesn't sound as cool as like tech startup,
Yeah.
whatever, develop this new technology that is super exciting, but maybe won't get used for anything.
Yeah.
I think that's why.
I think you're partially right. I suspect there may be a slightly more sinister reason. If you think about the ecosystem for startups, there's a whole lot of phases that need to go into that before you ever get to the point of profitability. For example, you're going to have your organization that helps them create the business plan, and then you're going to have your organization that does this and that and this and that. All of those are opportunities for money to be siphoned off of that original pot, so that when you finally get to the point of business development, which is the point, more revenue generation for the state, there's nothing left.
Yeah, true. Yeah, you're probably making a good point. I would say, unfortunately, it's just not a good path. And I think if you look at the track record of a lot of these groups and the startups that they've worked with, I would bet you that they haven't generated as much growth as we have,
Yep.
And us not having any support in that time frame.
Right.
I think you'd be better off, help us acquire another rubber company that's out of state and
Yep.
bring their work into our facility. heck, I mean, if you want to create more of these jobs to help us do that, because I'd almost guarantee you if we take over another company, we bring their work. We've done this one time already. We took work out of New Jersey. We brought it into Pennsylvania. It created jobs in Erie. Those jobs have been here for almost 3 years now. And it's a significant chunk for our business. We could do that again.
Yeah.
And I mean, the odds of it succeeding are probably like 95%. It's almost like guaranteed.
It's a no-brainer. I mean, it's absolute no-brainer. And, with the techniques that we use for marketing, they're almost invariably a success. There are very, very, very few outlier cases where something didn't quite line up right. Maybe the competition was too high, or maybe the client didn't participate in their own campaign, or whatever it might be, but it works. I mean, it works almost invariably. And, I just actually had a conversation with Senator Dan Laughlin the other day, and it made a lot of sense to him, because I told him basically whatever we've been doing as a state, whatever we've been investing in isn't working, right? We have virtually flat growth or slight decline over the past 5 years, and possibly even over a longer time frame. Our employment numbers are flat. The state in general is not growing. It's not getting better. So if we're investing hundreds of millions of dollars into economic development, that should be considered an investment that should have a return. So we're doing something wrong. So when you have the obvious use case of manufacturing, which to me is the staple of our economy, it's what creates stability in our state, and honestly, as a country, it's what creates our stability. And they're proven success stories, and then we have a proven technique that we know we can grow them with. This is what we should be investing in. What do you think about, why don't more manufacturers invest in their websites, invest in their SEO? Why do you think they don't do it?
It's tough. When you are a small manufacturer, you have a lot of things that you're trying to budget for. And as a manufacturing person, you generally gravitate towards investing in things that either make more products, have better uptime at making your products. The physical pieces of equipment are much easier to
justify.
Yeah.
Or at least visualize.
It makes more sense in your head. Now, I probably am coming at it with a little bit different perspective than a lot of business owners. I mean, I can tell you from the trade association that I belong to, I'm the youngest rubber manufacturing owner by probably like 15 years.
Yeah.
At least, maybe more.
Yep.
So, I think for me, I understand that I'm thinking long term, right? So that would be another a lot of manufacturers are owned by people who are 60 and older. I don't know, I'm not saying I have data on that, but I go to my trade association
No, I think
group.
you're right.
All the owners are at least 55,
Yep.
if not 60 plus.
Yep.
So, they're used to doing business the way that they always have.
Right.
And they're probably not thinking as long term as I am.
Right.
I just turned 40. I'm hoping that my kids have some involvement with my business. So I'm thinking very long term.
Yep.
When I think very long term, one of the key aspects of being a successful business is your marketing and people knowing and being able to find you. And now the way things work, if you're not coming up high up on Google search when potential buyers are searching for you, you're not going to do well and you're not going to add business.
Right.
Because no one wants a cold call anymore.
Yep.
No one wants you to show up at their facility.
Yep.
People don't operate that way anymore. People are used to, I don't need someone to sell something to me. I will find it when I'm ready for it, and I'm going to find it quick. I'm not going to take a lot of time. I'm going to Google search it. It's going to pop up. I'm going to find it, and I'm going to go.
Yep.
And even in custom manufactured parts, that's how it works.
Right.
So if you're not at the top of the list, you're not getting the new business.
I want you to push on that a little bit harder. So and I've run into a lot of individuals who misunderstand top of the list. It doesn't just mean top of the list for one term. It isn't just your company name, right?
Right. No, so you're going to have potential buyers that are coming from all different backgrounds that may need your service.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are going to think of you in a different keyword set than, if you're talking like a mid-size family-owned business that's manufacturing something, the person working there might research something totally different than, for example, we got found by Cornell University.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an individual that was tasked with finding a supplier to replace the seals on the vacuum system on their particle accelerator, their giant underground particle accelerator.
Okay.
And they found us.
Yeah.
And so, it's like that person's going to have a different search term than someone
in the aerospace sector that's, an engineer.
So you've got to find a way to get yourself to be searchable and findable and high up on the list of what comes up under a multitude of different
keywords. Yeah, even like recently, you obtained your ISO 9001 certification, and that opens up a new world of possibility for us in terms of keywords, because now we don't just have to go after the people that are searching for, rubber molding manufacturer, rubber injection molding manufacturer. Now we can go after those, larger OEMs that need someone that has an ISO certification. They're going to specify that in their search.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, sure. that's a well put. That's a good way to think about it. So, in your opinion, how familiar are you with, state grant programs, ways that they assist manufacturers? Do you know some stuff about that?
Not a lot. When I first took over Lake Erie Rubber, I tried to get involved in some of those things. I went to some different meetings with different groups.
Yep.
And most of it was just like, we're small, so we didn't have the resource to jump through all the hoops to get qualified. And so it made more sense for me to focus my efforts just on my business rather than trying to put a bunch of hours into maybe getting a chance at a grant, but maybe not.
Yep.
So I quit working on it because of that.
Yeah, and there are grants, and what I've noticed a lot. So there's the IRCs tend to distribute the grants. In my experience, there's also I think a federal program called Maytac that also does some granting.
And I've met with the IRC people, and they're awesome. Like, I really like them.
Yep.
It's just most of the time, and the IRC people have tried to help us qualify for some things.
Yep.
And it's just most of the time we don't qualify.
Mm-hmm.
We're a little too big, or we've been in business for a little too long.
Right.
Or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and you're kind of making my point. So there's a couple different issues going on here. Number one, the criteria for grants is probably not constructed correctly. I think we need to think about it in terms of a couple things. Number one, if we're going to try to promote manufacturers that are going to produce GDP for the state, we need to look in terms of established companies that have the ability to provide products and services in a wide geographic area. So basically, to build our GDP, we need to get revenue from other states and other countries. So they have to have good growth potential. They have to be well established. And then you have to have the technique that's going to work to do that. And if you have those three things, that is going to be the investment that's going to create a massive impact in our state. The other thing too is that these grants, they have a lot of different purposes, and they can do some grants for hiring, they can do some grants for a whole realm of things. But then the grant money runs out; they only have so much.
Right.
And so I think we need to have a grant program in the state that's specifically focused on a technique that's going to work for pretty much everybody. We need to identify the companies that are going to grow the GDP of the state the most, and then market the crap out of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's a simple program.
Mm-hmm.
And that money can't be wasted anywhere. It can't filter through organizations. It has to go directly to a service provider that's qualified to do the work. Here's what you're going to do. Here's how we're evaluating you on it. Within a year, man, you've grown our state by a lot. this is what I've been preaching, man. I just think that we need to figure this out. The conversation with Dan Laughlin was great, and I'm hoping that he is gonna allow me to make that pitch in a bigger arena.
I think another piece that might be important to that is you probably want to work on manufacturers that have some sort of track record of actually being able to take on growth.
Right. I agree.
Because that's the other thing that's really important is there are certain businesses that just either can't or aren't adept at handling growth.
Right.
And you got to really want it. Growth is painful. It's hard.
Yep.
It's much harder than just kind of operating day to day.
How would you evaluate that? You know, I mean, because I think if you talk to the owner of these companies, you're like, oh, yeah, we want to grow, right?
I mean,
how do you actually, what would you look at?
Prove it through your revenue.
You're saying if they've grown their revenue.
Hmm?
So
did you grow and did you succeed at the growth? You know, because some people try to grow and they go out of business from it.
Right. I feel like there would be companies, though, that haven't grown because they didn't really know what to do, but they could grow or they could have the capabilities to grow.
Maybe. I don't know. I would say for biggest bang for your buck, you'd want to focus somewhat probably on companies that have been able to.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
I don't know that needs to be a criteria, but it might be something worth looking into because, you know, it's like you're saying, what your goal is, let's have this money actually achieve something.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not just spend it to spin our wheels and have people doing stuff. And it's not that they don't have good intent. It's just that it's not focused in the right way.
Right.
And it's not succeeding.
Right.
So, and that's another thing that, you know, I always think about. Let's set some targets and then let's focus on, you know, find that out. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you don't need that track record, but like you said, let's try it on a few different companies and monitor how that works, how much they grow, and then that can help you build a better formula for how do you do it even more, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you find a particular set of information that tells you like, okay, if we see this and this and this, and then we add the extra piece into it, and now it grows a ton, let's look to copycat that and find more companies that fit that criteria.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So I think there's the component of individualized focus, grants that would focus on a specific type of company that has the best potential of growing GDP. My other idea is, you know, I built this website, Tri-State Manufacturers Marketplace. So I think that if you could have a site like that, it doesn't have to be that site, but it's already there. And if you were able to have our, you know, state and local government agency websites linking to that website, Google would look at that site as a pretty credible information provider.
Sure.
Then you list off all of your categories of manufacturers. You know, your rubber molders, your plastic molders, your fabrication shops, your machine shops, the whole gamut, right? Like we already have. So now this website has credibility. It has the content. It has the keywords. Now, all of a sudden, anybody that Googles, you know, ISO certified injection molders in PA, or not even in PA, just ISO certified injection molders, bam, top of the list. That provides a new inflow of business into our state, into our companies. And at that point, that person can select from a list of manufacturers that appear to, you know, fit their needs. And so even the ones that don't really have a lot of capacity for growth, give them a shot at it. They can quote it. You know, but eventually that searcher is going to find a company in PA that's going to do the work for them. So I think that's a way to kind of more broadly impact manufacturing in PA.
Not only that, but if you create that site and it becomes, you know, Google says it's very credible, and now you're giving basically a free backlink to the manufacturer.
Exactly. That helps them
Even
too.
if someone doesn't want to look on that website, now you're the manufacturer in Pennsylvania who's listed on that website, you've just instantly helped their site be more credible.
That's exactly right.
For free.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
Well, for whatever, you know, you build the website and then everyone who's listed on there, that improves your website's ranking.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's such a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And I think it needs to happen. So I'm pretty excited about the potential to get some people in government to understand kind of how this process works and see if we can get some of that, a state budget towards economic development to go into some things that actually produce results.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we know from experience that improving the credibility of our website makes it easier for people to find us.
Yep.
And most of us are paying a lot of money for backlinks on other credible websites to help, just keep us relevant with the competition that's out of state. So now if you create something that can give us an advantage without making it be a cost for the manufacturer themselves,
huge.
That's just an easy way to help us be, ahead of the game a little bit compared to companies that are in other states.
Yep. Yeah, I'm impressed with your knowledge of SEO. We've been through the gamut together, and you definitely understand it better than most people do. So let's talk a little bit about Lake Erie Rubber. What kind of jobs are you running right now? What are you really, really good at? What do you do better than other companies?
I think the biggest thing that we offer compared to our competitors is a very personalized experience in solving problems for our customers. A lot of the customers that we've added that have helped us grow have had issues working with another manufacturer, whether it be overseas or even in the US, but oftentimes overseas, where they're having a major problem that's impacting their company and it's not getting solved. Either they're just not getting a response, they're not getting a quick response, or the problem just isn't getting solved.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have offered that has really created some very strong relationships with some of our key customers is we're going to do whatever we need to do to solve your problem. Whether that be, digging really deep into the chemistry behind the formulation for the material for your product,
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be coming up with a creative way to make sure that we can meet your lead times or safety stock requirements so that you have the flexibility to do what you need to do from an inventory perspective and we can support you in a way that you need it. We'll develop agreements that help our customers succeed that way. Sometimes it's just we added a customer a couple years ago where it's just a really complex bill of materials that requires a significant variety of metal inserts that we overmold onto,
Mm-hmm.
where we're using the same mold to make 50 different components depending on the metal insert or the rubber material that's used to make that part. And a lot of companies were struggling with keeping all of that organized and making sure that the correct parts were coming in the correct format.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever the problem is that the customer is having, we give a very personalized experience in how can we solve that for you so that you don't have that pain point anymore.
Gotcha. Why do you think that you are able to do that when a lot of companies aren't? What kind of lends itself to that problem-solving mindset?
There's a couple things. First, I'm personally involved very much in our projects and the development. Obviously, as the owner of the company, I care a lot about making what I'm telling the customers we're going to do. I really care about making that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, we have developed a group of employees who feel like, they work somewhere that really cares about them, that really wants to see them succeed. We invest very heavily in our employees' personal success outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a bunch of employees that also want to see our customers succeed because we talk about it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like I'm coming up with all the ideas necessarily. We have a group of employees that are running these products on a daily basis who are constantly thinking about how do we make this better for our customer, and they come up with some really awesome ideas and some really fantastic ways to improve efficiency and make the parts better.
Can you give me an example?
Absolutely. So we make a series of parts that the secondary trimming operation was somewhat problematic. So for people who don't know, like depending on the rubber part you're making, sometimes whenever you mold a rubber part, there's a little bit of excess material depending on the shape left over on the part. Flashings. Yep. And this customer is using an older tool, and it's a little bit more worn, so there's a little bit more flashing on the part. Well, we're really trying to help them hit a specific cost and efficiency target. And one of our employees came up he said, have you ever used electric scissors? And I said, no, I didn't know they made it like an electric scissor that could cut through rubber. I've heard of fabric cutting ones or whatever.
Right.
So he found these electric scissors that made it so that the operator can run the part and do the secondary trim during the molding operation, so that we didn't have to have an extra fee for doing that secondary operation.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
And that was something that I wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah.
But the person that's operating the press thought of it, and it's a huge win for us and for the customer.
Yeah. No, that's really neat. Yeah, that's really cool. So what's your mechanism to keep the employees so engaged? I mean, I know a lot of companies play around with, targets to hit, and financial incentives for those targets. How do you kind of create that culture of, employees taking ownership over the process?
So we don't have, I try to avoid setting specific targets for output per day or things like that, because a lot of times what I've seen in the past is it ends up driving a different bad behavior. So if you just tell an employee, they'll prioritize getting as many parts as I can today.
Mm-hmm.
And so I operate, it's probably pretty strange to a lot of people, but I operate on this principle where I talk to our employees every day, and they know and they believe me that the better the company does overall, the more you will be rewarded for it.
Mm-hmm.
And through years of continuing to prove that to employees, hey, when we do better, you do better. When I got there, we didn't have 401k plan. We didn't have health care. Our pay wasn't very good. Over the past few years, we have a 401k plan. We have health care in place for our employees. The pay is extremely competitive, if not better than, most other companies that are similar to us. And it's all through our employees helping us. So when you build that trust where we do better, you do better,
yep,
and the people believe you, it's amazing the things that they'll come up with.
Yeah. No, I like that mindset a lot. Kind of delinking it from a specific activity, because you're absolutely right. I mean, if it's all about, you got to do this thing today or you don't get your bonus, then, all those other things, all those quality control things that they should be doing are going to get kind of thrown to the wayside.
Right. So our employees understand that not only do we need efficiency and quality, but also we need to keep our shop clean and organized and ready for a customer visit at any time. Because, it's their job to produce the parts, but also they want us to win new work when a customer does a shop tour. And they know that, hey, if we keep things organized and clean and looking good, that would help us if a customer happens to walk through today.
Yep.
So it creates an overall mindset where they're thinking of the company more in a holistic way than I think most employees do at most companies.
Yeah, that's huge. What would be one thing that you wish your customers understood more about what you do, about the manufacturing process?
I think the hardest thing to convey to customers is how dedicated you will be to their project, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't know that, right? They're just, when someone is shopping, they're really looking for capability.
Right.
And we do have some capabilities that are a little bit abnormal. We have larger presses than most shops do. We have 700-ton injection presses. We have 800-ton compression presses. So we have really large presses that allows us to do either very large parts or high cavitation smaller parts so that we can get our piece price to be super competitive through
Yep.
that. But the hardest thing that, customers don't know until they start working with you is just the dedication that we're going to have to making sure that they succeed.
Right.
And ultimately, I feel like that's, when I'm looking for a supplier, that would be probably the main thing that I would need, because a lot of times your needs change over time. It might be
Right.
priced today, but, it might be lead time tomorrow.
Right.
So are you going to be able to help me when I need help?
Yeah, and how do you convey that? We're as flexible as the rubber we mold. No, how do you convey that? Because, I mean, everyone says we're dedicated to your success. Like, that's such a boilerplate
It is.
thing. I wonder how, I mean, I think case studies are probably a good way to demonstrate that for sure.
I mean, and right or wrong, I always invite people to come into our shop.
Yep.
Because I think most of the time, once they walk through and they get a chance, our employees are going to talk to them when they walk through, because they know, like, hey, if a customer's walking through, I'll say hi. They can ask questions about what I'm doing, whatever. I think people get a feeling when they have that experience. And usually once we get to that point, we're going to win the work.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's tough, and it's tough to get people to find you. It's kind of like the beginning of our conversation, and making sure that the potential clients are contacting us.
Right.
That's the first step. If they don't contact us and they only go a couple other places before they get to us, if we don't see it, there's no chance of us getting it.
Right. Yeah, and that's half the battle, getting them there, and then convincing them once they do get there that you have the capabilities and the dedication and the experience and all that to actually do the work.
Right. And the equipment. I mean, the other thing I think that people see when they come into our facility, for the size of company that we have really modern and top of the line molding equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Our presses are from Germany. They are the best that you can get. The size of them tends to be, people are like, wow, that's a really large machine, So I think when people see that, they can see the investment that's made. And for the size of our company, I think it becomes pretty clear, like, wow, these guys are really serious about what they do. And they really want to be the best at what they're doing. And so they're investing in the best equipment. And you don't always see that in small manufacturers. And, we've been fortunate enough to have some success and be able to reinvest in our company.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's one of the biggest keys to your success is being willing to invest, in a range of things, being open-minded. I think the closed-minded manufacturer is kind of a stereotype, right? And, because manufacturers get solicited constantly, and so they're used to saying no to people. But I think at some point you have to think about what's working for other people. What are some changes I could implement, my capabilities in my marketing and my website? What can I be doing to model those companies that are successful? But yeah, I mean, that's impressive. I want to jump just for a few minutes into kind of like the amateur's guide to rubber molding.
Mm-hmm.
Just so I understand a little bit better. So, in my understanding, you have 3 different processes that you work with. You have your compression molding, your transfer molding, and your injection molding. What's the difference between those 3?
Sure. So really, it boils down to how the rubber gets into the cavity of the mold.
Okay.
So every part that we're making is made in a mold, which is basically a reverse image. Imagine, smashing Play-Doh into a shape when you're a kid.
Right.
It's kind of like that. So compression molding is really your most basic form of molding. And in that case, the operator is measuring out either a weight or size piece of rubber that they're going to set into the open mold. And then they're going to close the mold and squish it like Play-Doh. And it's going to undergo a chemical reaction because of the heat, time, and pressure called vulcanization to make the finished part.
Gotcha.
So your next step in complexity is transfer molding. Transfer molding, there is a pot and plunger on top of the mold.
Okay.
So there's going to be small holes called sprue holes that are going through the pot where we're going to set the rubber. and then it's going to smush the rubber through the hole into
Okay.
the cavity. So in this case, the operator is still measuring the rubber. This time it's always by weight for us in transfer molding. So the operator is going to weigh out the raw material. They're going to set it in the top of the mold. When the mold shuts, it's basically a piston that pushes the rubber into the cavity, and then same thing, time, heat, pressure, and you get your vulcanization to make your finished part.
Gotcha.
The third and most complex, but obviously there's some significant advantages to this style of molding, is injection molding. Injection molding, the biggest difference is that the machine is dosing the material. So in this scenario, we buy the raw material in a strip form. It is pulled in by a screw. The machine is measuring how much rubber to put into basically a big injection tube, and then the machine will use a piston to push that material through a runner system, and then it goes through little holes into the cavity to form your part.
Okay. So when would you use the 3 different types?
So compression molding is going to be used in a couple of situations. Low volume products, because the tooling is less expensive up front. So
Okay.
that's kind of a no-brainer. If you have a small project, you're going to make 100 parts or 500 parts, you're probably going to want to build a compression mold because you don't want to spend a whole lot of money on the tooling up front if you're not making that many parts.
Gotcha.
There are also scenarios where you might have something that is a seal that cannot have any sort of mark on the surface of the part. When you injection mold or you transfer mold, you are going to have what's called a little sprue mark on the part. Now that can be cut very flush, or we design it so that it tears off very flush to the part.
Yep.
But in some applications you can't have anything like that, and you might want to use compression molding.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Transfer molding tends to be kind of a nice intermediate style of molding. So maybe you've got a little bit more volume. It definitely makes us more efficient if we don't have to make individual little pieces of rubber to put in each cavity.
Right.
Now we've only got to cut a slab to a certain weight. So that that's going to bring down your piece cost.
Okay.
If you go to a transfer mold, it is slightly more expensive than a compression mold. The other time that we like to use transfer molds is when we have a material that cannot be contaminated in any way.
Okay.
So the nice thing about a transfer mold, let's say you're producing a food product and you don't want any other materials that have ever been run through a machine to touch your rubber. In a transfer mold, you're only putting the rubber that goes to that mold in that pot, so it has no contamination. That can be really good for colored parts, or like I mentioned, could be food grade parts, whatever it might be.
Okay.
That's a good scenario to use transfer molding. Injection molding, when you're talking high volume, you want to go injection molding because the machine is taking away work that the operator needs to put in, so you're reducing labor costs. You actually can mold a bit faster with injection molding because the machine works the material somewhat before it's put into the mold. So anytime you're going into a higher volume scenario, injection molding is going to end up paying for the additional cost of the tooling just in the efficiency and the reduced labor cost associated with it.
What would you consider to be high if like kind of the break-even point for an injection?
It depends on the part, how much rubber is going into the part. But, if you're getting into, let's say you're going to make 5,000 parts a year, you're probably going to want to run an injection mold.
Gotcha.
Unless there is a specific reason. We just added a new part that we're running in a transfer mold because it's an extremely high durometer. It's 95 durometer. It's about as... Durometer is hardness.
Okay.
So 95 durometer would be harder than the wheel of a shopping cart.
Okay.
So you're talking really hard.
Gotcha.
There's a perfect example of something that you don't want to injection mold that. It's not going to flow well through the runner system.
Understood.
So we're transfer molding that part.
Okay. And can you use the kind of the synthetic rubbers as well as natural rubber with all of these processes?
Yes. We use a lot of both, natural and synthetic. All of our materials are thermoset.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, I think that is a pretty clear, awesome explanation of rubber molding. I like that. Yeah, I think that can be kind of like its own little standalone piece. We'll kind of throw that one out there.
Cool.
But But yeah, man, thanks for coming on today. I think we had some great conversation. I'm always hoping that our conversations about economic development find the right ears. So hopefully that happens. But we love working with you. Love to see your success, and well, we want to see you continue to grow.
Thank you. We appreciate it. I'm also very passionate to see the growth of manufacturing in Pennsylvania and the United States. And anything, I agree, anything to help move that forward is something that I'm really interested in being a part of, because I just think it's so important for our economy and just the success of our country overall is improving manufacturing and getting more of it done in the U.S. It's really, really important to me.
That's right. Yep.
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, John.